Hello, and welcome to Glory Be. Interesting people and how they pray.
Each week, we chat with interesting people about their lives, their work, and how they pray. I'm Sharon Hanish.
And I'm Father Vince Fernandez, and we're joined by our producer, Mike Malcolm. Our guest this week is Father Bryan Ketterer. He grew up Catholic in Texas, attended the University of Tulsa, and then his junior year discerned a vocation to the priesthood. He attended St. John Vianney in St. Paul, Minnesota, and then afterwards went to St. John Vianney in Denver, Colorado. He was ordained to the priesthood in 2014 and is currently the associate pastor at Christ the King. Father Ketterer has experience in parish ministry, high school ministry, and college ministry. Bryan, good to see you. Good to have you,
good to see you, Father
on the
Vince.
Podcast.
That's right.
How was, we always ask our guests, how was your pandemic? You had kind of a unique situation because you were on a college campus. And they were all gone. So what did you do over those lockdown months?
There almost literally all by myself.
Right.
Even the professors were locked out of their own buildings. They had to have permission, get campus security to let them in. There's only like a few essential staff basically on campus. So it was a very, very, very unusually quiet campus, even way more so than summer. So it was kind of a shock because we went from the busy part of the year. March is always crazy, going through Lent, going into spring break. We're just all exhausted, ready for spring break. We come back, we're ready to just gear up for Holy Week and Easter, finish off the semester, finals, go home, pilgrimage, all sorts of stuff. So we're just accelerating to the end of the year. And then suddenly the email on that Tuesday before spring break, that evening, it says, no more in-person classes. Feel free to go home. You don't need to be on campus. And so TU is actually pretty early in the game as far as campuses went. And so, of course, everyone's like, yeah, party, no school, all of this fun stuff. And then the next day we had basically our Wednesday night 9 p.m. Mass as a community, and that was about the last time that we're all together. Students started packing their stuff and going home for spring break. So basically by Friday, most of the students had gone home for spring break, and then over spring break, we're like, what's going on? Other campuses started canceling classes after spring break and all of these things, and finally we got the email saying no classes in person after spring break, and then actually don't come back to campus. You're not allowed back on campus. So I'm like, that's the year. My year is over now, right in the middle of March. So it was crazy just going from 150 miles an hour to zero just instantly. And then I'm like, well, I'm sitting around on campus and there's no students on campus. Like, what does ministry look like when there's no students?
Right.
So we did some Zoom stuff, some Zoom catechesis. Our focus missionaries continued a lot of their Bible studies and all of those things, which were good for sustaining what we had going to a degree, but we quickly realized these students are already spending 6 to 8 hours or more on their computers a day just with virtual classes and group projects and all of these things. And then we're trying to do these additional things on the computer, and we're realizing it's pretty futile. So we basically just limped along ministry the rest of the year, and we're like, well, we'll just regroup in the summer and see what the heck we have to do for next year. So we basically survived. I wouldn't say we thrived at all, but
right.
So the relationships we already had were good because we could continue those on. But as far as a lot of our ministry of outreach, forming relationships, it's just impossible. You can't invite someone to Zoom that you don't meet. So a lot of those evangelization aspects were really just gone. But during lockdown, I was on campus pretty much by myself. We had 2 of our seminarians staying with us in the rectory at Christ the King, where I was in residence, plus the 2 other priests. So our rectory was pretty full, and those guys were taking classes during the day. So they were occupying different rooms of the house or the patio outside, wherever they could find quiet space to do their Zoom classes. And so I just go over to TU because it was quiet to get out of their way, and I had pretty much the whole campus to myself. So I did a lot of hammocking, anywhere from an hour to maybe 3 hours a day. I'd be sitting in my hammock,
It's important. You need your hammock.
I
time.
know. I was like, dang, I kind of missed my hammock time. And the weather was so beautiful for those months.
Right.
I was like, it was just like 70 to 75 degrees every day for 3 months. I'm like, I don't know how that worked out. The Lord blessed us. But I remember after like 2 to 3 weeks, I was doing a mass, and I think I had one or two of my missionaries were there at mass. Don't tell anybody. But I'm like, hey, I happen to be doing mass today at this time if you want to be around. It's not a public mass because we couldn't do all that.
Right.
And I was reflecting, I forget in my homily, of, like, I was thinking, I've always told myself I would pray more if I only had more time. I'm like, I have literally all the time in the world right now, and I haven't prayed any more, like, at all for 2 or 3 weeks. And I realized, like, no, not praying more was actually a habit more than just there are no excuses. And so I was like, this is an opportunity I will never have again in my life. I hope we never have this again.
Right.
I don't know. I've actually enjoyed it. So I'm like, I got to take advantage of this. And so I'm like, I need to start praying more, and figuring out my own schedule. So I actually realized this is like a really extended retreat.
Yeah.
I haven't had a retreat like this in years. And actually, I realized that I did a 30-day Ignatian silent retreat 10 years ago as of last summer in my spirituality year. And so I'm like, why don't I just revisit the Ignatian exercises and go back through those, not in 30 days, but over the course of the summer, basically, because I realized, well, it's mid-March, and I don't really have students back on campus until mid-August. So I got several months to... like 6 months of who knows what. So I'm like, let's just make this a 6-month retreat. So I started I would do 1 or 2 of the reflections most days, maybe do one in the afternoon, one in the evening, sometimes at night. I've always prayed well at night. And so I started actually I would do holy hours at like 11 p.m.
Wow.
I would just like go about my day, do my normal stuff, come home, have dinner with the priests and seminarians, hang out, have a beer, drink after dinner, and then like chat and hang out till late. And then I'm like, all right, it's like 10:30. I'm going to go back to TU and go pray a holy hour.
Oh, nice.
I also started doing praying the rosary more. During Lent, I started trying to get back in the habit of praying the rosary more regularly. So I was praying maybe 3 days a week. And I would often do walks around campus while I'm praying, because I find myself able to focus better when I'm moving rather than like sitting still and getting distracted. So I'm like, well, I have nothing else to do. Let's do a rosary every day. So I started doing rosary walks every day. And then I'm like, I still have a lot of free hours. Let's do 2. I started doing that. Got back into praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet every day, walking around doing that. So I was walking like, I don't know, 2.5, 3 miles around campus every day, just doing my prayers, plus time in the chapel, reading, hammocking, listening to a lot of music. It was really actually a pretty profound time, but it took me a while to get into that.
Right.
Because at first, when everything was pulled away, I was like, I just actually don't know what to do. I've never had this much free time in years. And so I wasn't even sure what to fill it with. And it was interesting. One of my first instincts was to play a video game I hadn't really played since like college, Halo.
Oh,
that was like a big thing when I was in college. And I'd
1,
come
2, or
home.
3? Which one?
One.
Okay.
One only.
Classic. Oh, okay. All right. A little disagreement there, but continue.
And so I think Microsoft had just re-released it, like the 20th anniversary edition. And so I downloaded that and was like playing that for like 45 minutes a day. I couldn't actually play more because like my brain can't handle that much video stimulation anymore. Not like the good old days of hours on end.
Right.
But I was like, how did I default to that? Like, gosh, that was like a 15-year-old habit that I like hadn't really surfaced. But it was interesting because it was probably that long ago was the last time I would just have days on end with nothing scheduled.
Right. Yeah.
So like it was just a weird, like I just defaulted to a place in my life I hadn't been in so long.
Well, I love hearing all of that. And our guests, I mean, we do have construction going on in the background. So if our listeners are hearing what sounds like gunshots, it's our building being put together in the background. But as you were talking, I thought, boy, you're just this when you started talking about Halo and video games, I started thinking about my own kids, and it just made me remember that you're just this regular guy going along, playing video games maybe. One of the questions that we like to ask people is about your vocation story. Mm-hmm. So you're on the TU campus as a campus minister when the pandemic hit, but you also went to TU.
Correct.
Talk about, like, you were there to study mechanical engineering, and if you'll just chat with us about how you ended up being a priest.
Yeah. So ever since I was, I think in 4th grade, I did a project, What You Want to Be When You Grow Up, and it was a mechanical engineer. I always loved taking things apart, trying to fix them, sometimes fixing them, putting them back together. And I'd always analyze why something broke and how you could improve it so that it didn't break. And so I was just always interested in math and science and engineering. And in high school, I took all sorts of math classes, science classes, all those AP classes. And so when it's time for college, mechanical engineering was still what I was passionate for and enjoyed learning about. So I was looking for a small school somewhere near home, but not too close to home, to give a little breathing space. And TU was a great school, and they were interested in me, and I was interested in them. So I ended up going to TU for engineering. I loved it, loved the school, loved the campus, I loved the Newman Center. I was involved in pretty much everything they did. I came from a very active high school youth ministry, and so I was like, give me everything you have. I will take it all. I'd actually been going to daily mass for about 2 years, my last 2 years of high school, at 7 a.m. before school. So when I got to TU, I'd go to daily mass at the Newman Center the days we had it, and then come to mass at St. Mary's, or actually I'd come to St. Mary's on Monday because if I had band at noon, I couldn't go to the cathedral on Monday, so I had to come for the 6:30 a.m. mass, which now is like crazy to me. I go to Christ the King sometimes, Church of the Madeleine, other parishes, wherever I could fit in mass. Made sure and fit that in pretty much every day in college. I'd also started doing some holy hours. Started using St. John's Hospital, doing some adoration there a couple days a week. So just increasing prayer time, started praying the rosary regularly. A lot of habits that were kind of there in high school, but really got established well in college. Just got super involved in the ministry of the Newman Center. And I also taught Totus Tuus for 3 summers. So I taught it the first summer after my freshman year. I was looking at doing an internship, but the internship ended up not happening. So I'm like, well, I'll do Totus Tuus. Sounds interesting. Sounds scary. Like teaching kids. I've never taught anybody anything in my life. Teaching kids the faith. I'm like, well, let's take a shot and see what happens. It was a challenging but a very fruitful summer. So,
were you one of the first Totus Tuus teams ever?
I was the second. Yeah, it was the second year.
Okay.
My first year
I
did it was the second year we had a Tulsa team.
Okay.
So yeah, we only had 3 teams, and it was still
like brand new.
Pretty new experience. So yeah, I did that, and it was very fruitful. And I told myself that was exhausting, and I'm never doing that again. The next year comes up, and I'm like, maybe I should do Totus Tuus again. And of course, they're like, hey, we need more guys. We have plenty of women. Yeah. We need some more guys. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll do it again. So I did it again, another challenging but a very fruitful summer. And I think it was maybe that year I was really starting to think about vocation. Because one of the things that Totus Tuus promotes both for teachers and for students is vocation. And we have prayer for vocation every day after Mass. We have seminarians that teach Totus Tuus also. And I can remember that first summer in training, meeting, there were probably 5 or 6 different seminarians teaching between us and Wichita where we were training together. And I was remembering thinking, this is the first time I've ever met a seminarian. I just had no concept of where priests come from. Mm-hmm. And just like, the priest walks in at the back of the church when in time for Mass, and that's just where they come from. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't know there was a process to become one. I didn't know, just had no concept of it. And I met these guys, and they're just living life together, having fun together, playing sports together. And then at the end of the day, they're like, okay, we need to pray night prayer together. I'm like, whoa, that's awesome. I want a piece of that. Because, like, they're doing the same things I'm doing, but they're doing it together and bringing faith into their life. I was like, dang, like, that's pretty sweet. So that really got the seed planted as far as priesthood specifically, and it cultivated that. I actually, at the same time, had been really thinking about religious life. I've been inspired by St. Francis of Assisi since I was in high school. So just his radical life that he lived, not just pursuing the ordinary, I perceived boring life that many people live, but like just getting rid of everything and doing something completely insane. I was like, dang, I'm a really just naturally like boring kind of person. I just want everything to be, I don't like to stir the pot. I don't like to do anything out of the ordinary. Just kind of do what everybody else does, fit in, like kind of blend into the crowd. But something about St. Francis just kept tugging at my heart, like just do something crazy, like it'll be good for you. And so religious life sounded appealing to me, and I pursued that a bit, visited some different places. I remember spending a spring break out at Conception Abbey. Spent my whole spring break, like 5 days of spring break, hanging out with these guys, checking out the monks when everyone else was like at the beach or whatever they do for spring break. Like, man, I'm such a geek. But it was great. And I loved it. And I remember at the end of that week thinking, I'm not called to religious life. It was just that simple. I couldn't tell you why. I didn't know. It was just, I knew in my heart I wasn't called to religious life. And the idea of priesthood was like, that's where I need to go.
So you left, you went, because I remember hearing your vocation story when I like was first a seminarian. You're only, I think we were like 3 or 4 years ahead of me, but then I just remember that you left after your junior year?
After my junior year.
So you only had like mechanical engineering, not an easy degree to go through.
Nope.
Right? A lot of hours and, things like that. But you decided, you kind of did like something radical, like very St. Francis-esque. Right?
Yeah.
In terms of like leaving that undone. So like how was that kind of discernment of like, because you could easily stay another year, finish the degree, and then go to seminary, but you decided, you felt very compelled.
Yeah.
And, what did your parents say?
Yeah. So I knew, I had a good sense that I was called because I was fighting it, and it kept coming back and it kept fighting back, and I was like, oh, this is unavoidable. Just spending a lot of time in adoration praying about it. I can remember reading a book about St. Padre Pio, who became my new hero, a Franciscan, of course, and a priest, and then St. John Vianney, who was also a priest and now the patron of all priests. So those two guys just kept hounding me, and I was like, oh man, the idea of priesthood keeps coming back, and I kept fighting it in prayer. I'm like, I really don't want to do this. Pick somebody else. And the Lord just kept saying, no, go for it. And at the whole time, I keep praying for more priests. As a Totus Tuus teacher, I saw the need for priests in our diocese and how big of an impact they have and their need for assistance. And so I kept praying that prayer, like, Lord, send us priests. And the Lord's like, go. I'm like, be the answer to your own prayer. So finally, I think I knew going into my junior year, actually, with a good certainty. I'm like, this is my last year at TU. I can remember even in marching band, they do like senior night in, October, one of their like last football games. And I was thinking I should go out for senior night. Because I knew, like, I was still fighting it, but I knew in my heart that I was not coming back the next year, that I was going to seminary. So it wasn't, at that point, it was a matter of when, not if. But I can remember all year fighting it in my prayer, and my good buddy, now Father Stephen Isley, kept saying, like, man, you just look frustrated. You, like, come out of prayer just frustrated. I'm like, I am. He's like, stop fighting it. It's like, okay. So I remember finally, maybe in the spring of the next year, just saying, all right, Lord, I just surrender my will to you. And he made it very clear. It's like, go to seminary next year. Like, go meet with the vocation director. So I'm like, all right. And I did the next day and got the application. Interesting, though, before all of that happened, I can remember, I think in January when housing stuff starts coming out for the next year. And it's like, oh, senior year, figure out your housing, which apartment you want on campus. You get all this priority stuff. I didn't sign up for anything. Signed up for no housing in January of my junior year, like 2 months before I'd picked up an application for seminary. And then I can remember maybe February, classes came out for the next year. And of course, being a senior and then actually being pretty far ahead in hours, I would have had like top priority for all the classes I wanted. Didn't sign up for anything. Didn't register for classes the next year. So I'm like, I'm not registered to go to school here next year, and I haven't even applied for seminary yet. But I knew that confidently in my heart. I'd prayed about it so much and fought it so much. I knew that's what the Lord was calling me to.
Wow.
I was just still dragging my feet and not actually taking the application.
That's just a really cool story. Okay, so our podcast is called Interesting People and How They Pray, and so we need to move to the How You Pray segment. But before we do, what did your parents say?
Yes,
quickly.
when I called them up, so I said, hey, so I'm applying for seminary. I'm not thinking about it. It's like, I'm applying for seminary. Maybe I'd already turned in the application. I forget. And they're like, oh, okay. And then I remember kind of chatted about it a little bit. And my parents were like, well, maybe you should finish your senior year, at least have like a fallback plan and all of this. And I was like, I don't know if I can. Like, I got to go. Like, got to go now. I've been, praying about it and whatnot. And I just remember like, we always thought the Lord had something special in mind for you, but this maybe is what it is.
Okay, well.
And so I can remember, and then like 5 minutes later, my mom called back. She's like, you've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you? I was like, yes. She's like, do what you need to do.
Wow.
Nice. So I'm like, all right. I got the like full thumbs up. Because, the first parent instinct of like, oh, we want to play it safe.
Oh, yes.
Right.
And I was like,
Exactly.
I don't trust me. I wanted to play it safe also.
Yeah. Well, that's just a
That's
great
funny.
story. Okay. So when we talk about, you talk about a lot about you had a deep prayer life as you were, it sounds like even finishing up high school, moving into college. You did do a lot of praying and discerning about going to the priesthood. So you mentioned that you have been on a 30-day Ignatian retreat. You mentioned St. Francis, St. John Vianney, the Rosary, so many things, ways that you've prayed during the pandemic. Talk about your prayer life. What does your day of prayer look like?
So I am not a morning person by any means. I'm like the farthest thing from a morning person, which makes it hard at a parish because parishes demand you be morning people. So it's actually a struggle to have a really solid routine, but I kind of break my time up throughout the day a bit, which takes a lot of pre-planning because priest days manage to fill up really quickly. So I do wake up and have some time of prayer in the morning, mostly praying the breviary, because in the morning, like my brain's at like 5% like awake at any point. So it's like just I need words that are written out kind of prayers, because if I try anything else, I'll be asleep or like in La La Land. So I do those in the morning, and then whenever Mass is during the day, I'll always take 30 minutes before Mass. And something I started doing just a couple years ago of I will just block that out, whatever. So if Mass is at 8:15, from 7:45 to 8:15, nothing can be scheduled. And that's just time for me to prepare for Mass, both my homily, of course, critically, but also just so when I walk into Mass, I'm not thinking about 100 things. And that's something I was realizing at TU. We'd have the evening Mass, the 5:15 Mass, and sometimes I'd have stuff that would go up till 5, and then I'd get over for Mass, and I'm just like, super scatterbrained, like I don't even know what, like I'm not even able to pray the Mass. I'm just kind of doing it, and I'm not even present. And so I actually started scheduling confessions about 30 minutes before Mass, knowing that if someone comes in for confession, like great, and if not, I have time to prepare for Mass. And so that I found that very fruitful. And it was also nice that if I had a meeting that was scheduled, and it's like, all right, it's 5:45, like I have to go to confessions. So it's a hard cutoff, like, no, I can't linger anymore, rather than saying like, well, I should prepare for Mass, but maybe I should stay. So yeah, I've really kept that discipline the last couple of years, and I found that very fruitful to help me enter into the Mass. Otherwise, it's really tempting, and I see a lot of priests, and myself included, in past years of just like running into Mass at the last minute and seeing like, okay, it's just like the next meeting. It's like, man, you got to prepare for that meeting though.
Right. That's what I mean. Even for me, that's. I remember you told me that maybe last year, and I was like, man, I definitely do that same thing. Just like, we have a like you said, we have a 6:30 a.m. mass. So if you ever want to fill in for us
No,
here,
no.
I'll let you know.
That's
on
like my
schedule.
biggest fear as a priest, that I'll get assigned here and have to do that mass.
That 6:30 mass. But
I've had that fear for like years, even as a seminarian. It's
Right.
like, oh, I can't do that.
But it does. I mean, it makes a huge difference, right? Of just being there present for mass, but just not even just for priests, but for
Well, that's what I was
lay
gonna
people
say.
as well, right? To,
Yeah.
because even when I was growing up, you show up to mass. Mass is at 5:00. You show up at 4:58.
Yes.
You're just kind of jumping in
Well,
there.
and sometimes if you're a parent with young children, you're lucky to get there by 5:03.
Yep.
You're
Right.
gathering people and rushing, but that's a really good suggestion that I've not heard from other people we've interviewed. Of prayer is important before mass to prepare for mass.
Yep. So I'll just, whether I'm in the office, I'll go over to the rectory, or sometimes in the sacristy. Just depends. Sometimes the sacristy can be a little chaotic too. So sometimes I'll go from the sacristy like back into the rectory, or wherever I need to have that protected silence.
Yeah, I like that. Okay,
then-
so I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm paying attention to the time, so I want to make sure we ask you a couple more questions that we ask everyone. Sometimes it's difficult to pray, and you talked about a little bit actually about the importance of praying before Mass, because it's difficult to run right into Mass to pray. But has there been a time in your life that it's been difficult to pray?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't know if there's any like big moments, but there's definitely been times, both in seminary and in priesthood, where I was just like, oh, I'm praying because I have to. Or maybe it's like, do I really have to? I don't know. You can kind of justify like cutting some corners here, like just pray the breviary really fast, and not spending that time preparing for Mass. Like, okay, I got my homily, like I don't need to pray anymore. So there's been times where it's just, there's like an inertia going against prayer, definitely. But I think those moments are good, because you have to dig deeper and ask yourself, like, why am I praying in the first place? And that actually, it's interesting. I would find on Christmas break, often when I didn't have students for 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, and then in the beginning of quarantine, when it's like, okay, all of my ministry is gone, what is my prayer like? And I realized my prayer like just kind of dropped off quickly, because a lot of my prayer was for the sake of ministry, which is good, but it was becoming all for the sake of ministry. And then when ministry was pulled away for a bit, temporarily, I'm like, I'm not praying. I'm not praying for me. Not just cultivating that relationship with the Lord. It's all about praying to prepare for Mass, praying for students, praying for parishioners, praying like for specific things, rather than like, I just need to have a relationship with the Lord first, and then ministry comes second. So it's interesting having to reprioritize that prayer and realizing I'm praying for the wrong reasons. Not that they're bad reasons, but I need other reasons to pray, like because I love the Lord.
Oh gosh, I really like that.
That's definitely like the pitfall. I mean, we had another priest talk about too. Like the pitfall of ministry is you just make everything about ministry, right? But to kind of reconnect to that personal relationship to the Lord and how that is primary at the end of the day.
Yeah, my prayer should basically be the same whether I have ministry or not.
Right, exactly.
That's good.
Well, Bryan, it's been great to have you on the podcast and to share your story and hear about your life. The last question we ask everyone is, if you had one prayer intention to have the whole world pray for, what would that be and why?
Yes. I've been meditating a lot recently on mercy, the idea of mercy, especially having the Divine Mercy Sunday just a couple weeks ago, and picking up the habit again of praying Divine Mercy Chaplet every day. I think I've prayed it every day since basically quarantine stuff started last year. And going through all the like chaos that was in the world last year, like, man, if we could just forgive each other, this world would be so much better. If we just hold on to grudges and hold on to anger and hate for so long, we just need to learn to forgive and learn to actually ask forgiveness too. I think both of those can be difficult. But man, our world would settle down a lot if we had more mercy.
Oh, I love that. Forgiveness is so hard, and this is maybe there's something I should have heard in that. That's forgiveness, letting go. I've heard it said, letting go of the hope that the past would be different. Yeah, and letting go of grudges and resentments, and so much chaos in the world the last year. Well, thank you so much for being here.
For sure.
We always ask our guests to lead us in the Glory Be to close out our podcast.
All right. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Glory Be is a production of the Office of Communications at the Church of St. Mary in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm your producer, Mike Malcolm. See you next time.